Hi there. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Donna Bond, and I'm a transformation consultant and spiritual life and business coach. And today I want to talk a little bit about the differences between self care and self love. See, I used to be a self care junkie when I was working in the corporate world because I would deplete myself so much that I would spend the entire weekend doing various different avenues of self care, trying to like repair myself so that I could get back up again on Monday morning and work myself to the bone throughout the week. And this worked for me for many, many, many years until it didn't. And as I have gotten more wise with age, I have discovered self love. And self love and self care are two very distinctly different ways to take care of ourselves. And so today I want to walk you through the big distinctions between the two, because I think there's great value in understanding what self love really means. And it's not some narcissistic aspect of our personality. Self love is the honor, reverence, and compassion, respecting all of the divinity and all of the humanness that is you, loving your wholeness. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So self-care is any activity that we do deliberately in order to take care of our mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual health. Like I said, I looked up self-love in the dictionary and it said something about narcissism, which I think is really just an old, outdated idea, because loving and honoring and revering one's self is a sacred act of cherishing our humanness and really honoring the journey that we make when we take embodiment and show up on this crazy planet and have a life. So this is what born this new definition. Self-love is the honor, reverence, and compassion, respecting all of the divinity and all of the humanness that is you. And so what does that mean? All of the divinity and all of the humanness. Well, we have a spiritual aspect to our nature. And this spiritual aspect is recognizing that we are a drop of God. We're a drop of the divine. And in that, we are a little piece of all that is. And we don't recognize this part of our nature on a regular basis because we're not taught to do so. But we understand what our humanness is, right? It's this body that I'm in, the brain that I operate with. But sometimes we can have a tendency to over identify with our physicality. And when we over identify with our physicality, then we let our ego and our personality run our life. And that's not always a good thing, because the ego and the personality are like an operating system. This is the part of us that is programmed by our parents and our teachers and our religions and our societies and our governments and all of the different influences that are out in the world telling us who to be and how to be. But the divine part of us, this spiritual, energetic aspect of us, is comprised of the energy of love. And this energy of love has an intelligence to it. And this intelligence can inform our life. As a matter of fact, I've written an entire book about this called Original Wisdom, Harness the Power of the Authentic You, which you can get on Amazon today or any of the other major booksellers. But this book is a lovely way to help yourself remember both your the higher aspect of yourself, that you have this spiritual aspect of yourself, but also loving your human self. So grab your copy today. Let me share a little bit more about the distinctions here. So these are really self-mastery tools. And self-mastery tools are really awarenesses that are offered to address the relationship that you have with yourself, right? We have a lot of relationships in our lives. We have relationships with our parents and with our spouses and with our kids and with our coworkers and with our friends. But what about the relationship that we have with ourselves? How we treat ourselves and relate to ourselves and revere ourselves is indicative of how we are training the rest of the world to treat us. So, treating yourself with the utmost love and compassion, treating yourself as if you are your own beloved, is a really beautiful way to honor and nurture and love your sweet self. My coach, mentor, friend, the gentleman who the foreword for Original Wisdom, Dr. Robert Holden, has this great quote. He says, if something is missing in your life, probably you. So here's distinction number one. Self-care can really be looked at as a responsibility, right? It's something that we do, and it's some sort of an activity. Whereas self-love is something that occurs with reverence, right? There's this sense of honoring that takes place. So that's distinction number one. And some examples of that is actually falling into a habit of honoring yourself. And that can look like having a spiritual practice, having like a daily spiritual practice or a daily meditation practice is a great way where you're creating the time and the space intentionally and consciously to set time aside to be with yourself, to sit with yourself in silence, to listen to yourself breathe. Now, why would you want to take some time out and do that? I think this is a way that we tell ourselves, I'm important, I matter. There's 101,000 things on my list, and I'm going to make sure that I'm one of them. Because when we don't do that, then our needs never get fulfilled because we don't acknowledge them. So that's one way, really creating this habit of honoring. Look at yourself in the mirror. Do a little soul gazing with yourself. Acknowledge the original wisdom that's inside of you by gazing at yourself in the mirror and saying to yourself out loud, I love you. I hear you. I see you. Really listen. Really acknowledge the journey that you're making in this life, the path that you're walking. It's pretty incredible. And we always want to validate ourselves by people outside of ourselves. But what if we started acknowledging and recognizing ourselves from ourselves? Imagine then how we're inviting other people to do the same for us. Making and keeping commitments to yourself. This is another great way to honor yourself. We can make a lot of commitments to ourselves, but if we don't actually keep them, then we're training ourselves to betray ourselves. Whereas when we keep a commitment to ourselves, this is building self-esteem, self-trust, self-respect. And like we want all of those things, self-esteem, self-trust, self-respect, but oftentimes we don't take the action that's going to inspire those gifts to rise up within us. And that's really how it happens, is like we take an action that translates into whether those things are happening or not. Speaking your truth is another great way to honor yourself. So being willing to be seen and heard in whatever it is you want to share out in the world, even if it's not popular. And then stand for you. And what I mean by this, I say this to my clients all the time, like, are you on your own team? Are you on your own team? So many of us, particularly we women, are so hard on ourselves. And we're the first ones to point out our mistakes or identify our shortcomings or come up with the 101 laundry list reasons of why we're not good enough or smart enough or pretty enough or whatever, fill in the blanks, why you're not enough. Tired of that story. Again, Original Wisdom has some great insights into it. If you are really done with that old story, with those old stories of not enoughness. Okay, distinction number 2. Self-care honors your temple. And I just want to be a voice to say self-care is important. Clearly, obviously, we want to honor this vessel that we're in, the temple that we're in. But self-care and self-love are so different that this is why I really wanted to identify the distinctions. So self-care honors the temple of you, and self-love honors the essence of you. So self-care is fragmented, right? Because usually when we're deploying a strategy of self-care, we do it in buckets. And those buckets, the way that I see them, are emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, right? You can probably think of some different self-care practices that you would do for your emotional body, for your physical body, for your mental body, and for your spiritual body. But those are all fragmented, right? They're all like separated into different buckets. Whereas when we're honoring the essence of ourself, this is a way that we recognize our wholeness and loving all the parts of ourselves. The essence is honoring our spirit and really the embodiment of all of the levels of our consciousness, which make up not only our humanness, but also that divine part of us. It's again, bringing together the aspects of ourself that are both fully human and fully divine. So that's number 2. Ways that you can practice those distinctions. Listen to your heart. We talk ourselves out of listening to our heart so easily and so frequently because we let logic get in the way. And when we can practice actually listening to our heart and then taking action on it, we're really honoring that soul part of ourselves, which is actually the bigger part of ourselves, the grander part of ourselves. The more of our soul that we can bring into this body and bring into our lives, the more it results in feeling happier, feeling healthier, being more joyful about everything that's going on in your life. But we ignore that part of ourselves and usually chase the things that our ego thinks are important. And just try this out. You don't have to take my word for it, but just do a little experiment with yourself and give yourself the opportunity to follow your heart with something and see where it leads you. Um, it requires permission, it requires space, and say, here's the thing, this is your life and it's fleeting, and you get to decide how you're going to spend your time. So that's a little invitation for you. Another way that you can honor your essence is to acknowledge the fact that you are a multi-dimensional being, and there is this connectedness to you and the rest of the world. It is acknowledging that there's these 4 different levels of your consciousness: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And recognizing and acknowledging that part of us operates on all those different levels can give you a mindset shift, right? It's like sometimes we're so reliant on our mental capacities. Like we think that there's only our intellectual intelligence. And very often we let our intellectual intelligence rule our life. But I want to invite you into the fact that there's also emotional intelligence, right? We can receive information through the way that we feel if we're willing to acknowledge and pay attention to that. We can receive information through our physical body, right? Our physical body is talking to us all the time, but most of us ignore the messages that we're getting from our physical body until it's too late. And then we wind up having to have surgery about something, or we'll end up with an illness that we then have to make a journey with to try to get ourselves back to whole health. So acknowledging that you have all these different dimensions to your wholeness is a way that you honor your overall essence. And this leads me to loving your wholeness. All right, distinction number 3. When we're talking about self-care, there's a lot of doing. Whereas when we're talking about self-love, it really is a way of being. What are some ways that we can embody this way of being? Number 1 is remembering. Remembering that we are spiritual beings having a human adventure, and that the soul aspect of us, the energetic spiritual aspect of us, is really the larger part of our beingness. So this isn't something that, I mean, it is something you can read in a book. It's something you can take a class on. I teach a lot of classes on it. The truth is, this is something that you remember. And I'm bringing an Eckhart Tolle quote to mind. He said, there is no spiritual truth I can tell you that you don't already know. All I can do is help you remember what you have forgotten. And I kind of think that's my job. That's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing out in the world, is to help you remember this original wisdom that is your true essence. See through the lens that all of life is for learning. And this is really the basis of spiritual psychology, which is the modality that I coach with, is seeing that everything that's happening in our life is really happening for the purpose of our continued evolution out in the world. That everything that happens, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I'm from Connecticut, so I like to say the super wicked ugly, everything is happening for our growth and learning, for our continued evolution, getting us the opportunity to reach our next level of potential. So when we can see life that way, we can surmise that we live in a friendly universe. that life is not out to get us, that life is not out to sabotage us. And sometimes when things don't go our way, we get into a fight with life. We think life is against us, and life's not against us. Life is just being life. And how we choose to see and interpret what's happening in life really is the key to how we either enjoy or don't enjoy the experience that we're having in this life. And seeing through that lens that everything is here to help me, everything is here to invite my next level of evolution is a whole new way to look at the world. All right, the last thing, a life mastery tool to embody self-love as a way of being is that your way of being goes with you everywhere. So your core essence is the energy of loving. And when you let that energy of loving, your original wisdom, guide you in your life, guide your decision making in your life, guide how you respond to life instead of reacting to life. When you let your natural, true essence, the authentic you, lead the way, which is speaking the language of loving, your whole life can look different. It can be so much more fulfilling and meaningful. It can feel on purpose. Stopping the search as you look for your purpose and really embody a way of being where you are living on purpose. And that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about self. If we're on a path where we're like searching for our purpose, we're looking, we're seeking, we're trying to find something, that is an underlying message that we are incomplete, unfulfilled, not enough. Those are all false. They're all false because everything that you need is right in here. It's not out there. It's not out there. It is right in here, but it might be covered up by some misunderstandings or some misinterpretations, or it might be buried underneath limiting beliefs that you were raised with. You know, we're not blaming our parents here. Everybody was doing the best that they could with what they had to work with at the time. And as a sovereign being, you get to decide. You get to decide if you're going to change your mind about something. You get to decide whether you're going to love yourself or whether you're going to continue to sabotage yourself, to victimize yourself, to dishonor yourself. You get to decide. So here's the big question. What awareness has this brought forward in you? What are your big takeaways from this 20-minute share? Go ahead, leave them on my Facebook page, reference hashtag SelfLove with Donna Bond. And if I can support you further, please feel free to reach out and get a copy of my new book, Original Wisdom. You can find it on donnabond.com. Thanks so much for tuning in.